recording on your side.
Awesome. Yeah, what was the issue before? Do we know?
Okay.
Was it just that it was on Discord, or was that the issue? Or?
Yeah, maybe it was because we're doing it through Discord and not through Zoom.
Yeah, I think that was
and
probably...
it was a disaster. So
I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't your fault.
That was a good chat we had. It was a great chat we had. Like,
we were talking about Culloden and you know what, and then a little bit about Scottish independence as well. But maybe we can come back to it another time. Maybe
next anniversary.
Next anniversary, yes. We get Davey as well.
Sure.
I've got a couple of questions. Random Scottish history. Is it Jenny? Did I get that correct?
I am Jenny. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
And Jenny, is there any chance we can get your camera brought a little bit closer to you? Would that be okay?
I could move.
But then we don't see the unicorns.
That's the point. You don't get my unicorn slippers that way. So I mean,
this is a tough choice.
You also won't get the corpse or my unicorn friend here. See.
And
I have
David,
one of those.
How do I pronounce
Did you get one?
It's McGuinness.
McGuinness, not Mac.
McGuinness. Irish. It's Irish. McGuinness.
McGuinness. Right. Okay. Yeah. I always want to try and make sure I do that. As many have said before, like, name is the most beautiful sound you can hear. Okay. So, are we all ready?
Do you want to do the introductions? Do you want to do the introductions, Alex?
Yeah. Okay. Welcome, everybody. And today we've got our special guests from Scotland who are going to be talking and debating about Scottish issues. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jenny, Random Scottish History, and David McGuinness. Hope I pronounced that correctly. If not, please correct me.
No, that's fine.
Jenny, would you like to introduce yourself to all of our viewers?
Hey, I'm Jenny. I'm in Glasgow. You can probably hear Transmit over at Glasgow Green at the moment. I'm sorry for that. It's like living next to a nightclub just now. I run Random Scottish History, rsh.scot. It's a resource site for everything Scottish history related. I try and keep it prior to the 20th century. I've also got hundreds of vids on YouTube. I've started doing podcasts too. So there's a lot out there, you know. Yeah. That's
fantastic.
It. That's really all I do.
That's a great thing to do. I'm not going to lie. I'm a historian as well. I love history, and from all parts of the world. So I'm a bit fascinating. I'm a glutton for history. David, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is David McGuinness. I do a daily news review topical show through the YouTube channel, and they own the Two Davies YouTube channel. And I'm called Indie Truck Davy because I used to broadcast from the cab of a truck on my break. But I've recently changed jobs to working in the evening where I shunt in a yard. So I still put my broadcast out at 11:15 in the morning on Facebook and then load it up to YouTube onto the Two Davies channel. And myself and David do a topical chat show for an hour on a Thursday.
Do you truck all around the UK, or do you go further afield in Europe?
I did truck around the UK up until recently, but I'm winding down my career. So as I say, I've got a job locally, but they're paying me a full-time wage to work 4 hours a night moving vehicles around the yard.
Grams. Max, please introduce yourself to our audience. I'm sure they know you already, but just in case we've got any new ones.
Yeah, if we have any new people, welcome. My name is Max. Been running this channel, my own channel, for a number of years now, mainly focusing on Brexit and British politics and trying to hold the Tories to account because I don't believe Parliament is doing its job. And I like to chat with people on issues of Brexit or British politics and international politics, including the European Union. And that's about it, really. Alex, tell us a bit about yourself too.
I'm Alex. I'm a historian. You'll know me as Political X. I'm also an author. I've written several books, travel guides, as well as history books, more on world wars and the changing nature of warfare and the Vietnam War than anything to do specifically with UK history. And I run my own YouTube channel, which has been going for about 2 years. So, excellent. Well, we're on to our first question. So, Nicola Sturgeon, how's she doing? That's the question we all want to know. How's she doing in terms of galvanising Scotland towards self-determination? Got that right. Make sure I got that in. And Jenny, please, what's your thoughts on this?
I'm a fan. Like, I think she's done a good job. I had some amount of American friends tell me that they were going by her pandemic regulations rather than what they were being told from anywhere else, that they were tuning in to hear her daily. On the world stage, she's a winner. It doesn't really matter what we hear in this country, because all we're going to get is negativity, because that's the way our media is set up as regards Scotland. So we don't get a lot of positive news about our own First Minister, but when you look further afield, I think we're in good standing with her at the helm. So
it's similar to New Zealand. I think, the Prime Minister of New Zealand is viewed in a very positive light. I don't know how she's viewed. I think also in New Zealand, she's viewed in a very positive way. Yeah, she's quite popular. But definitely further afield. And can you tell us maybe, and well, actually, Davy as well, can you tell us a bit about what you think the view of Nicola Sturgeon is in Scotland and outside Scotland?
In Scotland, the First Minister has a problem. For a start, our job title was never recognised. She's always called Sturgeon. She's always portrayed badly in the media because the way the media is set up here in Scotland. It is owned and controlled from out with Scotland. Scotland's one of the very few places in Europe where you have a devolved area that doesn't have media which allows it to talk to itself. That's not permitted. Scotland does not have a positive view of itself. So our media is pretty detrimental to the mental health of our children and the psyche of our people.
So, for example, I just want to ask.
No, go ahead.
So when we see on TV BBC Scotland, that's not actually, it's not actually run by the Scottish.
MI5 run BBC Scotland.
It's also, I've spoke to people that work for BBC Scotland, and on the whole, they seem to see it as a launch pad to a job in BBC London. The BBC Scotland is almost like the backroom job, the mail clerk job before promotion to the London BBC, so I don't know that any of them take it super seriously, but they certainly don't seem to be on side with Scotland. They're not very positive about Scotland in the main.
Also, can you remember, Max, this is important, we have to remember in the BBC Charter, it's there to promote unionism, it's there to promote the one identity across these islands.
It's interesting as well, because the BBC, whenever you watch news interviews with them, and there was an interesting one with Ben Shapiro. I don't know if you're aware of this horrible person.
The Voice.
Are you aware of Ben Shapiro? He's an American, and frankly, he's a bit of an extremist.
Fast
and he's
talker.
on the far right. Yeah, and interestingly, he took on Andrew Neil. And Andrew Neil, a BBC talk show host at the time, presenter, took him to task. But it was really interesting how he did it, because he took the opposite side of the view of Ben Shapiro and sort of went almost on the extreme of it. So Ben Shapiro's anti-abortion. So he brought up the fact that, why would you want to destroy people's lives by banning abortion? And Ben Shapiro took real offense to this, but didn't understand the nuance of the BBC for this interview, which is to be the opposite side, and that should, in theory, bring balance. So my thoughts and questions to you both is, and I noticed this with the Queen as well, I didn't hear anyone talking about republicanism when we should have had that counter-argument from the BBC. Do you feel as if you see both sides of the argument on BBC Scotland or on the BBC, or do you not at all? I'll throw that question over to David first, and then over to you, Jenny.
Sure.
No, we don't see any balance in the media. I get up in the morning and I put my radio on, and because I don't watch television, and we get a constant onslaught of our services are terrible, our government's crap at running the colony. From 6 a.m. in the morning till the popular programmes and music programmes come on at night, we get 3 hours in the morning of negativity about our government and about our country and about our people. And that happens for an hour and a half at lunchtime and at 2 hours at drive time in the evening. It is relentless negativity telling us that we are useless. Our Scottish government is crap at running the Scottish colony.
Can I ask, what was the last good thing that you heard that they said on the BBC? Might have to think back by the sounds.
The Olympics.
Even when we introduced the baby box to make sure that every child get a good start in life, the relentless negativity about the cost of it instead of the benefits of it. Every child born in Scotland gets a baby box. The box can double up as a crib. It has a mattress in it. There is a selection of foods, reusable nappies, clothes, all to help the child through its first 6 months or to a year of its life. There is a thermometer. There's a literature for the parents to read to the child. There is also advice on good nutrition and how to look after your child. Every single baby born in Scotland gets that, but we get relentless negativity to say it costs too much. When actually what we're trying to do is give our children the best start in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like a really good policy. Why wouldn't you want that? And it sounds with the cost of living, this is probably one of the most appropriate policies to have. And all you're hearing is people yammering about how bad it is.
This is what you're going to learn, I think, from our conversation, is the fact that there's no pro arguments from the other side. It's all negativity. The arguments are all why not to do a thing. They don't have arguments why you should do a thing. It's always why not to do a thing. That's all we get from the other side. Here
in Scotland, we have an additional child benefit which the Scottish Government have created because of the poverty that has been created right across the UK by previous UK governments. So we have an extra child benefit up here where they get an extra £20 a week per child to try and lift the children out of poverty. Now, we are told that's a relentless waste of money as well. When we try to do what's best for our children through our policies, which we can enact under the devolution settlement, and of course with tax raising power, I don't know if you're aware, but we have a separate tax system up here. So we raise our taxes differently from how it's done. You have 3 bands down that road, we have 5 bands up here. So out of the 5 bands covering many income levels, we actually bring in more money, meaning the people in the lowest level pay less tax, and progressively we got the 5 bands, we all pay a wee bit more in order that the collective pot is big enough to cover things like the baby box, free prescriptions, no motorway tolls, cheaper rail fares, cheaper council tax, no paying for the water except for water rates to get it into your house. We don't pay per litre. Free prescription charges, better NHS services. We have a different taxation system, and that's not being told to use people down there because they don't want you looking north and saying, how come Scotland can do it? So you're told that it's your tax that's actually subsidising us doing that, when we actually have our own taxation system. We send more per capita to Westminster in tax than any other peoples in the UK. We spend £1,276 per year. The average tax raised for an English citizen is £998, from a Welsh citizen £993, and for a Northern Irish citizen about £860. So the reason why we can do these things is because we have a separate tax system, and we're willing to pay more in order to ensure that our children get a better start. And we spend £1 billion a year mitigating the worst excesses of Westminster's austerity policies. £1 billion. We don't have a bedroom tax. We mitigate it. We give some of our block grant back to Westminster so that they can enforce the bedroom tax here. Unfortunately, it means we're paying the tax twice in order to get Westminster off our back so that our people don't get thrown in the street because they've got debt, because they've got a spare bedroom. We can manage all that because we have a separate tax system, not because we're subsidised by England. We don't get a grant from England. What we get is a transfer of some of our own tax monies back. Only some. We don't get our import or export taxes back. We don't get 100% of our VAT back. We don't get the revenues from Scotch whisky, meaning alcohol duty back. We don't get tobacco duty back. We don't get fuel duty back. So we managed to do all these extra things out of income tax alone.
I get that.
The argument for self-determination is to take all the powers back, all the taxation back, including putting a proper oil tax regime and gas tax regime back in. And then that wealth can start trickling from Scotland down to the rest of the UK because we will require services. And that
can I
because there's no trickling out of London to anywhere.
Can I just bring in Can I just bring in Jenny on that as well? You wanted to say something.
I do love your passion, David. I can see you pretty ticked off. Jenny, please, yes.
The rest of the UK was informed about Scotland's different taxation. Do you not remember when they came out going, oh, but all the businesses are going to flee Scotland because they're going to be taxed so much higher? It's like, well, that didn't happen. And in fact, if Scotland regains self-determination, joins the EU, we're going to get a bunch of businesses created in Scotland. We're going to get businesses coming up from England because it's easier to move from England to Scotland than England to Ireland or England to the EU. So we're going to gain businesses through self-determination. But I'm pretty sure the rest of the UK were aware of the taxation in Scotland purely just because of the fear-mongering surrounding it when it happened. Davey's very right. But he's not right in that we're sending so much money down because we're doing this. We have always been more taxed than the rest of Britain. We have always been more underfunded than the rest of Britain. And the reason for this isn't just the underrepresentation at Westminster, it's centralisation. And the centralisation tactic has a tendency to be insidious and infiltrate everything. It's infiltrated our education system. It's infiltrated all kinds of stuff. You were getting David McCrae, I mention him a lot. David McCrae was a real patriot of the 19th century who went to the Dundee School Board and railed against centralisation and the fact that the Dundee publishers and Scottish publishers in general were publishing Scottish textbooks, history textbooks for Scottish schools, but they were, instead of Great Britain or Britain, they were using England and English. They were saying James II and first instead of James VI. Do you know? He was giving examples from these textbooks by Scottish publishers for Scottish poor schools that were Scottish history books that completely muddled the history. You couldn't even tell what point in history they were talking about. If they're talking about James I in Scotland, we're going to think you're talking right the way back. We're not going to think you're talking about the 17th century. Do you know what I mean? Like, because that was James I of England in 1603. So
it's interesting you say that in terms of how it's
centralized. It's infiltrated everything.
Sorry, Jenny.
No, it just infiltrated everything. You cannot get away from centralization. Right.
There's an element of that, but there's also an element of derailing history in order. I mean, Napoleon said it, didn't he? It was like history's always written by the victor.
Yes.
And I got in a right old Barney. I still teach. And I got in a right old Barney with one of the history textbooks, because one of the questions that I won't name the group, but the group did bring up in a history module an entire section dedicated to the Chinese Opium Wars. Are you all aware of this?
Yeah.
What it was and what happened?
Britain were in favour.
But you wouldn't do a module on Pablo Escobar and debate whether Pablo Escobar was an excellent person for Colombia because he sold huge amounts of coke to the United States.
Yeah.
But in the textbook, and I went mad I rang them up and was very angry with what they'd done and had to point out that it needed to be retracted immediately. And interestingly enough, they've done that as well as the Indian Mutiny, which is another topic. But the fact is that we made Pablo Escobar look like a street dealer in terms of how much we were selling. But if you looked at the module, there was this whole debate about whether it was all right for Britain to sell opium into China to the point of devastating millions of lives over there, millions of families. And you're sort of like, why is this infiltrated into our history books and into our education system?
Because it is British history.
Like this. Sorry, Jenny.
Because it is British history. Like, Britain was fully in favour of this.
But you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't be able to teach Nazi history and go, well, concentration camps were part of Nazi Germany, so we should talk about the positives and the negatives of a Nazi concentration camp.
Yeah.
And I go, well, you can't talk about drug dealing on the scale of a pub, like, you know, that literally makes the worst drug dealer in history look like a street dealer.
But we've got to look at the good and the bad side. We talk about so much of the empire. We talk about so much of the history of the empire without focusing on the negatives. There's so much of the empire and the history we're taught about that doesn't involve.
They had such beautiful red uniforms. It was wonderful.
Yeah, they were just going to civilize people, you know, like
I can see David's great hand up. Go on, David.
It's funny that because we have a great movement in the Glasgow area in central Scotland right now about recognising our part in the slave trade, in the slave industry. And we've cited about making reparations.
Wow.
We've Glasgow University has started courses in Jamaica and things like that, and we started making reparation for our part in the slave industry and the wealth that we gathered from the slave industry. And Glasgow's right at the very heart of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Britain as a whole only finished paying the reparations anyway, maybe like 5 years ago or something.
2015, yeah.
2015, yeah. So all of us have paid tax.
Well, since we're talking Scotland, I want to make the point that Scotland did emancipate slaves about 50 years before England did, Westminster did. So it was in a court case, I think it was Knight versus Knight. And yeah, any enslaved man that stepped foot on Scottish soil was instantly liberated and a free man as of about 1782. And it wasn't until like the 1830s, I think, that Westminster finally did that. So
yeah, I think those dates are absolutely, I think those dates are spot on. Yeah, wow, interesting. Yeah, I do know it was the courts that set the tone for a lot of this. Because it wasn't just in Scotland, obviously. I think it was the courts as well as England later on that also verified this. So it's interesting that the courts were ahead of Parliament in many ways, which is another debate to be had.
There had been an increasing feeling amongst the population, and especially the women, the female section of the population that just weren't on board with slavery. They saw the people as humans, and they kind of, I think they empathized and couldn't see themselves in the same position and knew it was wrong. So there was a kind of growing feeling of discontent surrounding slavery before anybody started.
Can we just I'd like to just go back to the main topic once again. Just about no, it's fascinating, and I think we could talk about it for hours. But I'd just like to go back to what we were saying before about the referendum. So the referendum is due to take place. The Scottish independence referendum is due to take place in October 2023. I'd just like to get both of your opinions on that. Is that the right date? Is it too far out? Is it too close? And some of the problems not the problems with the referendum itself, that's assuming that the Supreme Court go ahead and say, yes, it's legal, it's lawful. But what sort of obstacles could the Tories and Westminster and maybe the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats and Tories in Scotland throw in its way? Maybe we'll start with David.
Well, in Scotland, the cuckoos in the nest, as I call them, the English parties sitting in the Scottish Parliament. And I don't mean that in any denigrative way. It's just that the parties that call themselves Scottish Labour, Scottish Tories and Scottish Lib Dems aren't they actually registered as Scottish parties. They're just registered in London. So the Scottish bit's a branch office thing, right? So we call them the cuckoo in the nest because they're unionists in the Scottish Parliament. So, but to be fair, there's nothing they can do in the Scottish Parliament. The Greens and the SNP have a majority. So the legislation, given that if the Supreme Court gives it the go-ahead, then the legislation will fly through the Parliament. It's October 2023, is it the right date? But it all depends on what the Supreme Court says. What we know is that Westminster is denying Scotland's democracy and telling us that we don't have a democratic right to ask ourselves the question of whether we want to be independent or not, because they refuse to give a Section 30 order or they refuse to participate, which makes it much more difficult.
Sorry, David. Just to interrupt, can you explain what a Section 30 order is?
Yeah, in the provisions of the 1998 Scotland Act, under Section 30, the UK government has the power to issue a Section 30 order to either take powers from the Scottish Parliament or to grant temporary powers to the Scottish Parliament. It's got to do with power the ball being power retained. But the point is, Westminster decided that a majority of MSPs in favour of Scottish independence in the Scottish Parliament, and a population that voted for a second independence referendum, Westminster decided that they won't respect that democratic decision of the Scottish people. Their argument is that there are three cuckoos in the nest, and between them they got slightly more of the popular vote than the two pro-independence parties, even though the two independence parties are larger, which is an absolute outrage. We use a proportional representation system, which was set up so that there couldn't be a majority in the Scottish Parliament. We have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. And they're going to do the same thing when they try and block a plebiscite election. What they're going to say is it's a first past the post system, right? So if we look at 380 Tory MPs own 34% of the vote throughout the UK, whereas Scotland, we will vote in probably 56 out of 59 SNP MPs, and we'll probably hit about 49 to 50% of the popular vote. But they'll tell us that's not enough of a mandate because it wasn't 50% plus one. What we have is the Westminster government denying Scottish democracy and the rights of the Scottish people. We are now effectively living in a colony, and we're second-class citizens within the United Kingdom, where our democracy and democratic choices are not respected. That is not the people of England. The people of England are Democrats, and I can see the surprise on Alex's face. You know, he's outraged at the idea that they're going to tell us that we cannot ask ourselves a question. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Jenny?
It's not right. But I'm not going to bring my point. I'm going to go straight over to Jenny. Jenny, what are your thoughts on this?
All they can put in as a hurdle is words. And really by attempting to stop the referendum, it shows that they're not confident that yes won't win, because if they were confident that Scotland would once again vote no and retain the union, then they wouldn't have anything to say against it. Also, B, it makes them look bad. Every time they deny people the right to do anything democratic, it's going to make them look bad. So either way, it's not going to go well for them not allowing us to have the referendum. If anything, their stubbornness is possibly even going to shift some of them on the fence to go, do you know what? They're telling us what? Like, are they serious? They're not going to, do you know what? Nah, do you know, if this comes around again, I'm going to vote. Yeah, we need a way for this lot. If they're not even going to let us have a referendum, and it's not unlike, right, the Brexit referendum wasn't supposed to be acted upon. Do you know what I mean? It was a tester vote to test the mood of the nation, and they just went with it. And a referendum is really just to test the mood of the nation. It's not really for any other purpose. Unlike, again, Brexit was really the outlier in that. Referendums are just to test the mood of a nation. So to deny us even that,
considering it's such a big
it denies our nationhood. It denies that we are a people, and it denies that we're a country. And that's why you've heard me use the term colony twice. Yeah,
you should. I mean, I've got a point to bring in that. I want to know, Max, what are your thoughts? But I'm also interested. Are you aware of what Ireland is, or Ireland, and how Ireland is looking at this?
Yeah, Ireland. Well, first of all, Ireland, in regards to EU membership, Ireland is very supportive of Scotland becoming a member of the European Union, and have said, I think not officially, but members of the government have said that they would support Scotland's entry to the European Union, and then obviously Scotland needs to become independent. Now, when I was speaking to an Irish politician, and he dodged the question because obviously he's a member of government and he can't really talk about that. But the most politicians in Ireland, on both sides, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, are supportive of Scottish independence. They understand the value of having Scotland as a member of the European Union. And then there's a friendly relationship between Scotland and Ireland, and it has existed for for a long time.
Well, I was going to say there's not the antipathy from, or the antagonism from Ireland like there is from Westminster. They're not going to sit over there hoping that Scotland fails. Do you know what I mean? Which seems to be really all we're getting from Westminster, is hopes that we muck up and we trip and we fail, so we have to rely on Westminster.
I just want to say something about that. That's this idea that they hope that it fails, and this is the Brexiteer mentality, that they always thought that that Europe didn't want Brexit to succeed because they wanted Britain to fail in a way post-Brexit, or that Ireland is angry because Ireland wants Britain to fail. Ireland doesn't want Britain to fail. Ireland wants, in regards to Northern Ireland, it wants to maintain peace there. We're going a bit off topic there, but it's, yeah, this idea that Sorry, no, Jenny.
No, sorry, Max, I cut you off. Sorry.
No.
Yeah,
no, that's all I wanted to say.
Right on the I was verifying that you're right on the money on what you were saying. Could you imagine if the EU had said you're not allowed a referendum on membership? The Tories.
This is a question. I would sell my right arm if a journalist from the BBC, from Question Time or something, asked one of these Tories or even a member of the Labour Party this question during Question Time or whenever on Newsnight, asked a Tory this question. Okay, you're saying that Scotland shouldn't have a second referendum. What would you think if the EU had said the same thing? Sorry, Britain, you can't leave. We're not going. And even if you do have a referendum, we're not going to recognise it. Yeah, they would lose their bloody minds.
No, there is a distinguishing difference.
No, I know there is a difference
because the EU is a federal union of sorts, where the countries have control of everything for themselves. That was what Scotland wanted. They wanted a federal union. That's all they wanted, was a federal union. See, when it was read to them and they realised it was an incorporated union that had been sold to them, they were up in arms. Treaty of Union articles were burnt in cities all over Scotland when they found out that it was an incorporated union and not a federal one. Had it been a federal one, we would have far more say. Our parliament wouldn't have been taken from us. I mean, England did it in a way to get full control. That was their purpose, to get an incorporating union, was to get full control, because it meant that they could take our parliament. In a federal union, we would have been allowed our parliament, and Westminster would only have acted as the imperial parliament. So they would have only decided issues where it concerned all of the United Kingdom or was international dealings. Stuff that was for Scotland alone would have been dealt with by the Scottish Parliament in a federal union.
That's an interesting thing. I wonder if that could be brought up in court and said, well, you actually were meant to sell us this.
No, well, I mean, see, right.
That wouldn't.
The lords, including Findlater and Seafield, and those names are important, were sold. They were bribed. They were told, listen, and they had people whispering their ear. I mean, Westminster and the Queen Anne at the time sent up envoys to make it so that it was an incorporating union. They were set on that, and they weren't going to accept anything else. Seafield and Findlater, two of the lords that bought into this garbage, 6 years after the union was signed and ratified,
they wanted out.
They tried to repeal it in the House of Lords and failed by about 5 votes.
Yep.
So 6 years after the union, the two of the lords that were bought and sold into this bargain realised exactly the lay of the land. They saw what Scotland was in for. They saw we were going to be robbed blind. They saw that we were going to be taken for absolutely everything we had.
And they had a vote.
They wanted out. They had a vote in the House of Lords that only failed by 5 votes. We were that close to leaving the union 6 years after it was enacted.
But they were allowed to have a vote.
Of course, they were lords. They were in the House of Lords.
But this is something that hasn't been brought up because everyone's going, no.
I've brought it up a lot in a lot of places.
Jenny will understand this because she's read the articles and the articles in the Treaty of Union. But actually, and the way that Westminster was incorporated, there is actually 2 governments sit in Westminster. That's why English votes for English law works. They sat as the English Grand Committee. The Scottish Grand Committee, which is the Scottish government, still sits. So technically speaking, if we vote for, say, let's say 58 of the 59 MPs to be pro-independence in the general election, they can go to Westminster, reconvene the original Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Grand Committee and suspend the Treaty of Union.
Yeah.
So that mechanism's all there, Alex.
You also have the point that the claim of right was never rescinded. That was a 1689 act that was ratified in the Scottish Parliament. Right. What that act meant was, well, I think it was really for Queen Anne, but it was to Scots, the people, not the Scottish government, the Scottish people telling authority that they were sovereign, that they didn't answer to anybody, that authority answered to them, that they were there to do for the people. So, which is the way that Scottish society was always that way.
It goes all the way back to 1320.
We always chose. So
the Declaration of
1689.
Oath.
Yeah, the 1689 Claim of Right solidified that, cemented it, made it an act, ratified. That was updated in 1989. The Claim
That's
of
right.
Right.
Robin Cook.
So Scotland actually doesn't recognise Westminster's sovereignty at all. The people of Scotland are sovereign. Westminster has no authority.
So when are you two being called into the Supreme Court?
I would go.
I was just going to say I would love to see both of you face
there's
do
actually
a
a
question
group
with Jacob Rees-Mogg, because Jacob Rees-Mogg is fake. Is a fake intellectual.
There's a group I'll mention. I've not looked into them too much, but they've picked up this claim of right baton.
They've misunderstood the act, but they've misunderstood the act.
I feel like they have, but
Yes.
people can check them out anyway. Salvo.scot. People can check them out and have a look at what they're about. I think they're on the right lines, but I think they have misjudged. I actually think they're basing it on the 1689 Claim of Right. It's defunct. We do have a 1989 update to that Claim of Right.
I think you'll find this quite interesting, Alex, right? They talk about Westminster says that under the 1998 Scotland Act, the Constitution is reserved. So we need Westminster's permission to have to change the Constitution. What's interesting about Scots contract law is if you can't produce the contract, then it doesn't exist. And there is no written constitution. So under Scots law, I'll take them to court and they can tell me they've reserved this non-existent contract, and I'll tell them to put it in front of the judges. And the judges will rule in a Scottish court that actually the constitution doesn't bloody exist.
It's a fact. The closest thing Scotland has to a constitution is a 1320 Declaration of Arbroath, and that's pretty far in the past. That's pretty defunct by now.
Out of date. Can we just move on a little bit? So both of you support Scotland Scottish self-determination.
No man, I'm all for the union.
so as you're a unionist, I'd like to hear some of the arguments for the union.
I was a pro-unionist. I was a Tory pro-unionist.
Get off the channel.
That was how I was brought up.
Yeah. How did you get on here? Are we being like?
We're being trolled.
That program when they pretend to be something to wind you up?
This has been a prank in the making for years.
Are you related to Douglas Ross?
No. So I can tell you that the pro-union side have no positive arguments. And I actually didn't realise that. Because I was brought up being told that Scotland was too wee, too poor, that we relied on Westminster, I was actually brought up with a phrase repeated: Scotland would become a third world country if we were to ever leave the Union. I was brought up with that phrase. My parents were Daily Express readers, so that puts you in mind of what I grew up with.
Were you in some sort of cult?
Nah, it feels like it now. But do you know all it took for me to change my mind in time for the referendum was shifting my historical focus? Because I realised that in a decision so big, I actually didn't know very much about the country I was about to vote for. So I just started looking into the history. I went for pre-World Wars because the World Wars did affect our history, something terrible.
Did you watch Braveheart?
No, man. No. I got into the histories. I read the history books. And do you know what? See, just learning about my country made me change my mind. And that's why I set up Random Scottish History. I set it up to be non-political, but I felt like if other people had access to the information that I had access to, if other people were able to learn about Scotland as I had, maybe other people would also change their mind. Maybe I would have other converts that had been brought up the same way I was. So I made the site to be non-political so it would appeal to everyone. That's why even the Treaty of Union articles, which is when the site kind of got a wee bit political, obviously, it's written by almost 100% pro-unionists telling you what's wrong with the union. So these pro-unionists are giving the nationalists of today the arguments to leave. Because
it would have been interesting. It would have been interesting if a federal system had been set up in the first place. Everyone was able to elect
have this problem.
president.
We wouldn't have this problem now.
But if everyone had set it up as a proper federalized state, like in the US, and England had its Senate and had its laws and its commons as an English version, there was a Scottish version, there was a Welsh version, there was a Northern Irish, and maybe further back in Irish.
The Home Rulers weren't even just looking for that. They wanted all the colonies represented in Parliament as well. They wanted Home Rule for everything that was governed by the UK.
And yet totally ignored, and yet
only Ireland got it.
Well, that's the part of the court. I'm going to be very careful in how I phrase this. It's one of the arguments for the American separation was that there was no representation. No taxation without representation was a key slogan. Now, you could argue about a number of other things that were involved there in terms of that cause. But it's interesting that it almost feels like Britain has never, ever learned from that big... I'm going to be careful as
Westminster's never learned.
That big situation. I'm not going to call it a mistake because of other historical reasons. But that historical situation.
I would say that traditionally in England there's been an elite that have been in place for 800 years. It's not the English people or even the politicians of the day that don't learn. It's the actual upper echelons of your society. The stuff that actually incorporates the state. I have no idea how the mindset works in England, but the way I see it is the class system seems to be endemic. And people... Joe Bloggs expects the middle manager is better than him. The middle manager looks at the upper class guy and says he's better than me because he owns the factory. And the rod often caps them up it's all the way up the line. You know, and rather than having actual sit down talk to each other the way that we do here in Scotland, they're actually taking opinions from the very top as being read. And that brings me back to something I wanted to say about the media here. When we, the people of Scotland, watch Prime Minister's Question Times, and we watch the way that our politicians are spoken down to in Parliament, we can see where the media gets it from. I mean, Dominic Raab stood in for Bojo last week and said to Mr. Blackford, it's nice to see you in his place. And he meant that after he just pointed out that Scotland was a second class, the people of Scotland were second class because they were going to deny our democracy. So therefore, we were in our place. And our place was below them.
Yeah.
I see you, Jenny, and I promise I'll bring you in. It's just something I heard. He keeps calling you a lot. I'm going to completely delete that. He keeps calling the SNP the Scottish Nationalist Party.
Yeah.
And the bad thing is, if this is just like, if I was looking at a Machiavellian movie, I would just be going full out love for you guys and being like, look, he wants to separate, but we love him. You guys are great. We don't want you guys to leave and going on the sort of love front. But he does these snidey little remarks like that. And I'm getting really sick of the speaker. And I'm going to call him up at some point in the next couple of weeks and because you can call up them all direct. And I'm going to give his secretary a piece of my mind. Because if he doesn't stop that with that Boris bastard, and that's the first fucking second swear word now I've brought in. I'm going to lose my tether with him. He's not doing his job, and stuff like that should be knocked out immediately. And it should be the smallest of things, and it's really nasty behaviour. Sorry, Jenny, that was my two bits.
I mean, it was a great segue actually from David there as to how we're treated in Parliament, because from the very get-go, we're told that a Parliament like Westminster that had gained Scotland in the way it did, in such a kind of contentious manner, you would think that they would be quite light-handed with the way they went about treating Scotland. But we're told that in every case, the offensive act was offensively done. And that's a quote. But also, I have a wee kind of
This is
comparison.
the first time, Max, that anyone has brought out a book.
My book.
Quoted from it. I love that.
My book.
I love it.
I'm going to read from my book. As a tiny illustration of how nothing has changed.
I need to go and get a pillow first, and then I can just...
As a tiny illustration of how nothing has changed, we still remember when Scotland's representative Angus MacNeil stood up in Westminster prior to the 2014 referendum on Scottish self-determination and asked, a poll last week showed that 68% of Scots want oil revenues devolved to Scotland. Does a Prime Minister agree with 68% of Scots, or does he not? In response to which he received howls of laughter and derision from the opposing Conservative Party, and the answer from then Prime Minister David Cameron pausing occasionally to allow the hilarity of, well, if you ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer. In 1894, Dr. McGregor stood up in Parliament and asked, seeing the difficulty Scotchmen find in getting redress of their grievances in this House, may I ask the Lord Advocate whether he does not think the time has now come when Scotland might resume control of her own affairs? He too received laughter and derision in response, with no answer returned to him on that occasion.
Sure.
Nothing changes. And that's exactly what the Treaty of Union article shows you. It shows you that we've been going round in circles, doing the same arguments over and over again. People after the referendum, even in the lead up to 2014 referendum, were coming out with all of these arguments and answers that they thought were brand new and interesting. And then I'm showing them where it's already been asked and answered many times before over the last 300 years. And they were surprised by that. But you know, our history was forgotten. So many, we tend to rest our laurels on the Bruces and the Wallaces of our history.
Yeah, a little, yeah, I can see that. But to a certain extent.
The World Wars denied us memory of all the patriots that stood up for Scotland in the 19th century, the Waddies, the McRaes, the Burnses, scrapped all that memory, and there was just apathy after the World Wars, and we've only just got going again since the 60s, and we're now at this point, you know.
Can I just ask a question just about Parliament? I don't. You guys are probably familiar that Sinn Féin abstain from Parliament; they don't take their seats. Now, I think that's probably. I understand why they do that, why Sinn Féin don't take their seats in Parliament, but on the other hand, I think it would have been important. I think there are some times when it would have been good to hear from Sinn Féin attacking the Tories, trying to hold them to account, because generally from the Northern Ireland point of view, all you hear from is the DUP, because they're the biggest party in Parliament, because Sinn Féin are not there. What about the SNP? Should they? I'm just throwing this out because I think it's better to have some sort of voice there, because you're able to at least challenge the government. But should the SNP abstain from Parliament like Sinn Féin, or would that be a mistake?
For Sinn Féin, it's fine to make that point, and it is making a point. It's going, we want absolutely nothing to do with you, and no uncertain terms. But like you say, it denies them a voice in Parliament. We're already underrepresented. I don't think we need to deny ourselves a voice at Westminster. And really, in showing our voice and speaking up in Parliament, it's the reactions of the other side that bolster our arguments. You know, it is the derision that we get. It's the laughter, the walking out, the ignorance. You know, that's what goes towards our argument in Parliament. If we weren't there, we wouldn't have that.
David?
So this segues really nicely into two things then. If that's okay.
I love your segues.
Yeah, I like my segues. And you guys generally help out. Whenever we have on, sort of lubricates the segue into happening. I don't know why, but it does happen.
But before we say, can we get David's response to that as well? About
David, go on.
Should we walk out of this the Westminster Parliament? It's not really necessary. We have returned a majority SNP MPs now for the 3 elections in a row, I think it is. 2015, 17 and 19, wasn't it? So 3 elections in a row. Now, as I've already explained, there's 2 parliaments sit there, and there's the Scottish Grand Committee. The only reason why we haven't recalled the Scottish Grand Committee and declared is because we haven't run on a manifesto of only this elections about Scottish independence. The reason we stay there is because when it comes down to it, when Westminster and the politicians grow up down there, and I mean that seriously, and I most sincerely do not mean the English people, I mean Westminster and the politicians down there grow up, then when it comes to the point where we have a vote for England to take back control of England and Scotland to take back control of Scotland, then we can sit down and have a grown-up negotiation, the way the Czech Republic and Slovakia did. You know, what we really need. what we really need is our SNP MPs there to be able to call the Scottish Grand Committee and say this game's a bogey.
Alex, your segue?
You've done another great segue, David. So I can plug my video now. So I did a video on it, and I used the Czech-Slovakia split as an example of why I think Scotland could thrive, because you've got a lot more than Slovakia.
We have more natural resources and much higher educated population. So, yep.
And finances, your banking system as well, pretty solid.
Especially once we get central bank on the go.
Yep, once we're in central bank on the go.
Bring back the Scottish unicorn and Merck is what I say.
Oh, I've got a good one. Who would you have in the first Scottish banknote? So I'll give that to Jenny first. Who would you have on the first Scottish banknote?
I would recall were patriots that were forgotten. I would have, say, Charles Waddy.
You can have one, Jenny.
Yeah,
you can only have one.
Charles Waddy.
Tell me about Charles Waddy.
My favourite nationalist. Charles Waddy was an Edinburgh barrister who wrote one of my favourite books, and it's the treasure of my archive because you cannot buy this book for love nor money. It's called How Scotland Lost Her Parliament and What Came of It. It's a lovely, short, little, succinct, beautiful little book that just gives Scotland's history in the Union and the effects of it, down to the clearances and everything. And I republished it so that it is available for everyone to read, and I made it as cheap as possible for everyone to buy it. So literally, I make no money from it. It's as cheap as Amazon will let me sell it for. And it's just a fantastic roundup of Scottish history within the Union. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, that's a fantastic plug for your book.
Charles, it's not my book, it's Charles Waddy's book, and it was amazing. It was published in
I'm kidding, I'm sorry, Jenny, I didn't kid all the time.
1891 it was first published. So it was published by his own publishing company. So he would have had a lot of them out there. So the fact that there are none available to buy, there are no copies online other than what I've put out there is very strange to me.
Can I then ask we get a link to the book and we'll put it in the description?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
You can read it for free on the site. All of my information is free on the site. Every book I publish, you can read for free on the site.
We'll put that in the description as well then. Awesome. Yeah. And we'll keep that in the vid. David, who's your Scot on your banknote?
Me.
Dave would be my second choice then. Why not?
Oh,
as a non-Scot. Okay. I was going to go with that great Scottish hero Mel Gibson.
I was going to go with Winnie Ewan actually, but I just thought I'd throw a bit of humour.
I would go. Now I can trace my ancestry back to Scotland by 150 years, and the family was originally from Aberdeen. So I've got a teeny weeny say. At least I made the effort to look back, and I've put on this, which is a bit, but it's not Kerr colours. It's not Kerr colours. Kerr colours are red. I like the colours. I'm going at the moment. I'd have Sir Alex Ferguson on there. I honestly like the leadership skills, the stuff I've read, the ideas, the concept of teamwork, and there's quite a few within the football. You can talk about Shankly, who was the Celtic manager as well, who did the Lisbon Lions.
Jockstein.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a football coach, and I mean, honestly, at one stage, you guys were pumping them out as coaches. I assume you just terrified the English players with a Scottish accent.
That's it. Say anything but shout loud enough, and everyone gets scared of you and runs away.
What's interesting about all these guys you've spoke about there is the clubs that they took to greatness were all sort of based in the communities that these guys came from. Shankly in Liverpool, Ferguson in Manchester, and ex-industrial towns, a bit like Glasgow back in the day or Aberdeen back in the day. So, these guys made great teams in England from the same sort of backgrounds that we had here in Scotland.
Oh, they did. I mean, Fergie did well at Aberdeen as well, didn't he? Jockstein was Celtic that I'm only aware that he won anything with. I don't think he won.
He was quite successful at Dunfermline, and that's why he ended up at Celtic.
And then Shankly, before Liverpool, where was he? Anyone
No
know?
idea. I'm no.
I'm not a football
I'm
fan, so
not a bit of football, no.
No.
But we're segueing. Sorry, not in a good way.
can,
So
can we jump?
yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Alex. Go
I
ahead.
was going
We're going to have to
to
speed
go
this
to the
up,
next
guys. I
topic.
start work at
So-
6 o'clock.
So,
okay.
Jenny, over to you. Problems with the Tories and Boris relating to Scotland. Is that a problem for Scottish independence? Is it a positive?
No.
I mean,
It's a
Boris
boost for
going up
Scottish
always
independence.
Sorry, Jenny.
The scandals, the corruption, the pissing our money like away to varying aspects of cronyism is a boost to Scotland. It's a boost to our bid for self-determination.
But that might go now. So does that mean you want
Disney
Boris to
no,
stay?
no.
It's not that good, that's it.
I mean, just the Tories in general are that. They don't even need Boris to be that. You know, they've just proved themselves to be incapable over this period of time they have been in recently.
65 years, 67 years now, we haven't voted for Tories.
Yeah.
And
Was
we've
it like
had majority- and
1955 or something was the last time?
1955, we haven't voted for Tories
Yeah.
in Scotland yet. We've had the umpteen Tory governments forced upon us. Every Tory government that comes up down that road is a genuine bonus on our bid for self-determination, on our bid to take back what's rightfully ours.
They're the antithesis of Scottish society. We're a very social country. We're very progressive. We quite like helping each other out, you know. We're not quite so isolationist. And again, the immigration policies that they insist on being brought in because they're that way minded.
Alex, do you mind if I segue
Just
this a wee bit?
detrimental to us.
Now, we're a very a left-leaning democracy here, where we don't really have a class system. You know, that's why we don't allow Scots to get above themselves, even if they're multi-millionaires. If they sit down at the table at the pub with you and try and boast about their money, they're getting thrown out the door.
Yep.
You know, we don't have that. Our impression of Brexit and what's happening in England is that there's some sort of a nostalgia for a good old days that didn't exist, a land of milk and honey that was never there with empire. How are the people in England viewing Brexit and things like that? I mean, when we were watching it here in Scotland, we were hearing Empire 2.0 and all sorts of silliness coming out of the northeast of England. I mean, we'd reporters in the northeast of England asking the people in Newcastle why they were voting for Brexit. They were going, "We want our empire back." It was absolutely mind-blowing to us, guys.
There's a really interesting thing here, which I've noticed with Scandinavian countries and Norway specifically, is that they don't have this class system and they don't like people being too rich and flaunting their money as well.
Oh, people can be rich. They just.
But it's the flaunting of the money.
Yeah.
Can I just
Sorry,
comment and will we better wrap it up for Dave because he has to go to work soon. This is very interesting, and my wife did a thesis a bit somewhat related to this at university about, for example, in Ireland there was this belief, like in Scotland, until the Celtic Tiger came, and then there was the Celtic Tiger, the economic boom back in the late 20th century and early 21st century. But there was this idea, oh, look, now I have money, I have to show it off. But it was there was this attempt, it seemed, to emulate the Lord of the Manor of the 1800s or the 1900s. This idea that, you know, now I have money, and you could see it if you visit Ireland. If you go to the out the country, you'll see these massive homes that are built in the style of the Lord's Manor of the 1800s. It's amazing to see. And people would build these massive homes because they had money and they wanted to emulate the nobility. But they had money.
The Tories have. See these working class Tories that we see as being turkeys voting for Christmas. They're aspiring Tories. They're voting for them because they think that by voting for them, they may end up with a slice of the pie in some way. And I'm saying that for experience of my own parents. My dad was a small business owner, but he felt like the Tories were the only way to protect that. So these aspiring Tories are, like you say, they're trying to gain wealth just to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? But it is a different mindset. And it's a mindset that closes you off to the possibilities of socialism and a cohesive society and cooperative society that helps each other, because these are the people that don't like seeing people not in work and maybe on benefits. Maybe they don't like even seeing like handicapped people on the sickness benefits sometimes. And you think, what kind of a world do you live in where everyone has to be working themselves to death just to get on in life? That doesn't make sense. No one should have to do that, you know?
Nope. Go on, David, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, that's why we've got the saying up here, we're all jock tamps as bairns, because if you try to get above yourself, we're going to wipe the legs out from under you, no matter how powerful you think you are. That's why we set our legal system above the crown. So that's when you're all celebrating Her Majesty down there, who is your sovereign. Up here, we're sort of going, what the hell is that all about?
Yeah.
I mean, we were cancelling Jubilee events because nobody was turning up.
Don't get me wrong, Bridgeton Cross. I posted a video of my walk home from work at the Jubilee weekend.
I've seen it.
You saw my video? And it was just bunting everywhere, flags out of windows, and then the cross was just covered. And it's like, oh, for fuck. And the other day, like the 1st of July there, because we've got the Orange Lodge headquarters at Bridgeton Cross, we get them twice through our door. But I think that's mostly like the permanent saltire in the front window that gets them stopping outside just to make a point. But I'm on the way home in the cab and I said to the driver, I was like, oh, that fucking bunting's back up again. Is the Jubilee no done? Like, I'm sure they got rid of that. He's like, oh, it's an orange weekend. It's like, for fuck's sake. You just never escape it. And it's seen this part of Glasgow.
There's always these wee pockets. Normally it's Morningside in Edinburgh. Normally it's a Hillside in Aberdeen and a Bridgeton Cross in Glasgow.
Bridgeton
But
Cross.
I mean, you've seen the BBC reporters going round Glasgow, especially ones for London, who were absolutely outraged that we weren't celebrating the Jubilee up here. And we were all looking at them asking us as if they say, are you mental? There was even one set up in the Kelvin Grove Park and laid out a picnic. And you might join us for a Jubilee picnic. You are walking by and you're like, are you mental?
Yeah, no, even if everything's free, no, we're not into it.
But before I go, I'm going to tell a quick story about sovereignty and Scottish sovereignty. The Queen came up to open the Scottish Parliament for the 20th anniversary of the devolved Parliament, and in she comes and she sits down, and the party leaders are all welcoming her, and it gets to Patrick Harvey of the Greens, and he stood up and he hit her right across the tisher, right across the kisser, and they went like that. Welcome to Scotland. The sovereign people of Scotland welcome you here. And then he sat back down.
But I mean, they kind of did the same thing after taking the oath to Parliament, didn't they? Because they then came out in public and went, actually, I know we gave the oath to the monarch because we've got to do that, but actually we pledge our loyalty to the Scottish people and we're here for them, you know.
Which is interesting, because when you have them give their oath in Gaelic, nobody knows what they're saying, so they don't know whether they're swearing like just the Queen or the people.
Yeah, there's that too. I mean, to be honest, say it in a broad Scottish accent, they'd have no clue what you're talking about. So, you know.
Folks, I seriously have to go. Although my new work is only 150 yards from the door, I do have to go to work. I start at 6.
In which case, we'll edit this bit out and just go. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Thank you for my sensational co-host Max. Thank you to our fantastic guests, Jenny and David. We'd love to have you back on. Would you guys like to come back on?
No.
Yes. Hey, Jenny, it's been fascinating. I'd love to come back on.
Of course I would. Absolutely anytime. I'm pure amenable. Yeah.
Anything,
Jenny, by the way, just so that you know, when we were discussing earlier before Alex showed up and went on air, I have utilised your website.
Darling, I'm going to get your address from you and I'm going to send you a whole mess of books.
You don't need to. I know where to
I'm
find
going
it
to.
All the information.
You're going to get hard copies. You're going to get.
I'm going to put a message out saying for bloody sake, don't give her my address. I don't give my. You can find my address on my Facebook page.
I'm not going to chase you, darling. I'm not going to chase you.
But I do have to say that I have used the Random Scottish History resource myself.
Thank you.
That's all right. Just so that you know. And the fact that, the bit about research earlier, it's just the thing about research is it's whoever does the research, as they select what they think is important as they're imprinting their point of view on it, was the point I was trying to make. So if I did the exact same research as you've just finished, I will probably come up with a different outcome or a different set of
But I did it with a view not to insert my own viewpoint. That
yes,
wasn't the
I get that.
purpose.
We all do that.
Like,
We all do that. Oh, all historians do that. Because they try to think
they're
none of their
pro-unionists,
opinions
for
in the
goodness
history.
sake.
Right, listen, guys, I really do need to go to work. I'll catch you later.
Okay, thanks a
very
lot.
much. Bye.
Bye, darling.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. So we'll let David go.
Yeah, that was fun.
I'm going to stop recording now.
It was
So, but,
far more friendly than it started out, eh?
yeah.
I am going to send him books. Absolutely right. Like,
yeah.
So, something I wanted to mention. I didn't say it on the stream, but I didn't get a chance. But I think the level of understanding of history in Scotland seems to be much higher than anywhere else. Yeah, you know,
but
I'm not
only
talking about in
because
England, but also in Ireland. In Ireland,
it's
people
out
don't
of
know anything.
necessity. It's out of necessity. Like, honestly, I wouldn't have even, my historical focus was ancient Greek and Victorian London, because of course I was a fucking Tory, so Victorian London was my like perspective. But I wouldn't have learned Scottish history. I would never have got on the path had it not been for that first referendum. I would still probably be like a no voter at the moment had it not been for that first referendum. So I think it's out of necessity that people educate themselves, you know.
Guys, I have to go as well, so I'll have to say bye. Thanks so much for coming on. And
That's right. I'm still awake from yesterday, like being awake for yesterday's video, but I'm going to stay up because I'm going to watch your live stream and that, and maybe
okay,
on
cool.
Discord afterwards. So
all right, cool. Maybe I'll see you on Discord then. So
yeah,
okay.
So.
And I'll talk to you again, Alex, and about Friday as well. Okay.
Bye.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.